Hi, on this episode of In the Kitchen with Andy, I've got an amazing recipe for you that's just going to knock your socks off. Who doesn't like a perfectly well-cooked steak? Now, I don't mean well done, but a perfectly cooked steak. It's an absolute pleasure beyond belief. And the technique that's employed by a lot of chefs that you might not be familiar with, but if you go to a high-end steak joint, a lot of the steaks that you eat there and pay top dollar for are actually cooked in a French method called sous vide. Sous sounds just like my mother's name, Sue, and sous vide stands for under vacuum. And what chefs do is they take a beautiful ribeye steak like these here, they put them in a vacuum seal bag, suck all the air out of it, and then they drop it into a water bath at the absolute perfect temperature. Now, a lot of people, like me, like their steaks done medium rare, which is right around 135 degrees. So what they can do with this technique is put the steaks in that bag, put it in that 135, 140 degree water, and leave it there until just when they're ready to cook it. Now, they've got some pretty fancy schmancy equipment to get this done. Some of it can get pretty spendy. Of course, they've got much larger systems for big restaurants. But here is an amazing kitchen hack that's really going to help you out. If you want to have steakhouse quality steaks at home. So we're going to cook sous vide steaks in a beer cooler, believe it or not. Now, of course, most of the time you think, oh, I'm going to put some ice in here, some beer and some wine and maybe some sodas or whatever and keep everything cold. But a cooler can just as easily keep things warm, or in this case, well, hot. All right? So what I've done is I've already filled this up with fairly hot water. So right now it's at 142 degrees, and I'm using a waterproof thermometer in there to measure the temperature or to monitor the temperature of that water. And now all I've got to do, even if you don't have one of those vacuum seal systems, you can use a Ziplock bag, believe it or not. So grab my tongs here, and what I've done is after I got these unwrapped, I just put a little bit of Lawry seasoned salt on there. If you don't use Lawry's seasoned salt on your beef right now, I can't recommend it highly enough. It's absolutely delicious on beef, on burgers, on all sorts of things. So let's get my steak in there. Steak number one. Let's get steak number two in there side by side. Now here's a little trick. You want to make sure you get all the air out of the bag because you want this to sink in the water so that it's completely immersed in that toasty water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zip it almost all the way shut. Just left a little bit open there at the end. And now as I drop it into the water, what's going to happen is the pressure of the water is going to squeeze out the rest of that air. So I'll just drop it in here real slowly. And as I do so, it's pushing up to the top. And it's pushing that air out of there. I'm going to open it up just a little bit more, let some more out. There we go. Get the rest of that air out. Now I'm going to zip it shut. And it's sunk down into the water. Close it up. And we are currently at 142, just dropped to 141. And I was expecting it, of course, to drop a little bit because the steaks were at room temperature. So now we're at 140. It should even out right around 135. And here's one of the many, many beauties of this type of cooking is you can't overcook it. The steak will never get hotter than the temperature of that water. But what it's going to do is going to cook that steak from edge to that perfect temperature. And then after about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, we've got two of them in there, so we'll probably go an hour and a half. They're going to be at about 135, 138 degrees all the way through edge to edge in that meat. And then I'm going to finish them off in a minute and a half to 2 minutes tops in a blazing hot cast iron pan and get that nice crust, a nice bark on the outside of the meat. And I'm going to help that process along with my handy dandy kitchen torch here to get a little bit of that carbonization on the outside of the steak. Again, just like you'd have in a top end steakhouse, because their meat is going to come out of a probably 16 to 1800 degree broiler, and you get a little bit of that char on the edge of the fat and the edge of the meat, which is just so delicious in that entire mouthful. So there you have it. We're using a beer cooler to cook some steak. It's going to sit in there for about an hour, hour and a half, and we're going to come back and give it a sear in the pan, and it is going to be amazing. Stay tuned. Okay, so our ribeyes are doing wonderfully in the cooler. They've been in there for about 45 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. The temperature had dropped just a little bit below 135, so I heated up some water on the stove, got it up to boiling, dumped that in, and now we're sitting pretty at 137. So, as that continues to soak away in its wonderful warm bath, I'm going to get some mushrooms going because I don't know about you, but I love some delicious sauteed mushrooms over the top of my steak. So I'm going to get my pan heated up here, get a good fire going on my pan. I don't know if you can see this pan. What I'm using today is a Dubouillet, if you want to say it in French. This is a carbon steel pan, and I love them because they never wear out. Unlike the Teflon pans, the ceramic pans, all those surfaces eventually will wear out, whereas these, they're much like a cast iron pan, but much lighter in that you can season them. So this pan may look dirty at first glance, but it's not. It's just been seasoned through many, many, many preparations of all sorts of different things, eggs or grilled cheese sandwiches or sauteing just about anything in there. So the pan is getting a little hot. I'm going to add some butter to that. A couple little pads in there, let that get melting down. And I've already got my sliced up. These are just basic white mushrooms. But they take the flavor so nicely. Boy, that is a really hot flame. So we're going to turn that down just a little bit. Butter is foaming up. It's looking dynamite. And I'm just going to dump the mushrooms in there. And one of the myths that many people still believe is that you shouldn't wash mushrooms because they absorb a lot of the water as you wash them, and it's just not true. This has been tested many times scientifically, and it's perfectly fine to wash them. I just put them in a colander, shake them around underneath the water, get all the dirt off, break up the bigger pieces so we don't have any really huge ones in there. Now, as they're starting to cook down, I love to add the same thing I season the meat with, and that's Lawry seasoned salt. This stuff is absolutely delicious. And as the mushrooms start to cook, of course, they're going to sweat. Some of the moisture that's inherently in them already is going to start coming out. And these are going to get absolutely delicious as they cook down. Another thing I love to add to my mushrooms is Worcestershire sauce. However you're actually supposed to pronounce that, I don't know. But Worcestershire sauce, a little bit of that in there. Control that flame. So these are going to simmer down slowly for a few minutes. I can keep them off to the side. We got the canine alarm going here, so hopefully you can. Hopefully it's not too noisy in the background with the dogs going crazy. But my mushrooms are cooking. These are going to be absolutely delicious. And we'll check back in just a little bit. Stay tuned. All right, so our beautiful ribeyes have been bathing in that water now for about a little over an hour. And I've got my pan, I don't know if you can see that smoking. I've got this thing blazing hot, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to get a little bit of butter in there and some olive oil. And that's browning up really, really fast because I want it super hot. So I'm going to yank this out of the water. They are looking dynamite. Had a little bit of Lawry's seasoned salt on there, and that's about it. The butter is melting extremely fast and browning up. I've got this thing super high. Let's get these in here. Woo! And get them searing. This should go very quickly. All right, so while they're searing on one side, I'm going to add a little bit of my favorite herbs, the herbe de Provence. On this side, some freshly ground black pepper. And they already have the Lawry seasoned salt on there. So a little bit of the juice came out as they were in the sous vide, in the water bath. The temperature had dropped just below 135 right before I took it out. So that's an absolutely perfect temperature. And I've got this thing blaring away. Getting a really nice sear on there. Just a couple more seconds here. I'm going to give these a flip. And when I do, I'm going to take my kitchen torch and I'm going to torch the other side to give them that beautiful char, just like in your favorite steakhouse. So let's see how these look on the other side. Woo! Oh my goodness. Can you see that color? That is fantastic. And it's just that quick. So now I've got this thing on full blast. And I'm going to slowly go around these steaks and char the outside of them. You can probably see it smoking. And in just a few more seconds, hopefully I'm not going out of my shot here, we are going to be done, and that's it. So that's why with this method, it's almost impossible to overcook a steak and not deliver perfection to your family and friends and whoever might be coming over for dinner. So I've got a little bit of béarnaise sauce there. Other side of that is done already. Let's get this one out of the pan. And just that quickly, the sear is done. I've got that beautiful char on the outside. And these steaks are going to be cooked to perfection all the way through the middle. And look at that. Perfectly pink, edge to edge, and just that beautiful char on the outside. And I guarantee you, all that pink meat that you can see there is perfectly medium rare. And you just have that wonderful char, a little bit of crunch on the outside. I'm going to peel off or slice off a little bit on the edge of this. I forgot to grab myself a fork before we did this. And give it a little bit of dip in the béarnaise. Oh, wow. Melt in your mouth. Absolute perfection. You can't overcook it when you're doing it in a sous vide, even in a beer cooler like this, in a Ziploc bag. This steak is absolutely delicious. I'm going to put together the rest of the plate, and my family and I are going to enjoy a just amazing steakhouse-worthy ribeye steak here at home. So thank you so much for watching. All the ingredients and all the tips will be in the description below. I appreciate you watching. Stay tuned for even more great recipes coming from In the Kitchen with Andy. Thank you so much.